Good morning, afternoon, evening. What I'm presenting here was a brief summary of a paper for a conference session at the Teem21 conference in the PLE track. And in this paper, I'm looking to bring together three things. Personal learning environments, which many of us in this track are familiar with. Workflows, and scholarly primitives and scholarly ontologies, which have developed over the past 20 years. And I think it's useful to bring all these together and look at their similarities and how they can usefully inform one another. Personal learning environments have historically been represented by diagrams that put the learner at the center and arrange around the diagram the various tools, often digital, which they use to collect and manage their personal learning experience. And one thing that I have not, I think, managed to find from the various collections of PLE diagrams on the web is some of those which reflect the inclusion of non-technical spaces, spaces for reflection and for internalization and for asserting your own intellectual ownership of the material which you've collected and shared. So that's one thread. A second thread is scholarly workflows, of which there are many, but these are the ones that I think work best. One that I wrote a paper about, research, analysis and writing as stages of the process of scholarly or academic workflows, in order to try and tease out the process by which students produce essays, which we often do not explicitly teach them, or we hive it off to writing centres, but we do not embed it in disciplinary knowledge. The others, seek, sense, share, get, understand, share, connect, are also reasonably memorable. Get, understand, share, connect emerged from research on a number of scholarly workflows around 2012, and the authors who put that together mapped different stages of suggested scholarly workflows that sought to explain how academics and scholars and researchers work and what the stages of research are. And they put that together in their Get, Understand, Share, Connect framework, which includes, under each of the phases, some tools, very often again digital tools, but also some things which involve more thought and introspection and analysis. So they put that together. The other one, which is particularly memorable, is Harald Jarsch's Seek, Sense, Share, which he has been working on for well over a decade, which again shows the development from looking for information to making sense of it and sharing it back out to the wider community, which are all elements of personal learning environments. But the difference between scholarly workflows and personal learning environment thinking is that the scholarly workflows have a time dimension and seek to organize the tools along a time axis to show the process. Process, of course, is not always linear. Sometimes we circle back, but having it expressed this way is, I think, helpful, particularly for students stepping through an assignment. So these here are the most memorable ways. I like these research, analysis, writing, seek, sense, share, get, understand, share, connect, because they're things that you can explain easily to students. People can remember them. People can understand where in the process they are. They also map to John Unsworth's scholarly primitives, which he wrote a paper about almost 20 years ago, explaining where he set out to identify the basic fundamental building blocks of scholarly activity. And he came up with this list: discovering, sampling, annotating, comparing, linking, and then illustrating and representing. And they map surprisingly well to the different stages of scholarly workflows. What has happened in recent years is that there's been an effort to define scholarly work in terms of scholarly ontologies, and there are several competing ontologies, but the one that I like best is the NEDIMA scholarly ontology, NEMO for short. It has a reasonably substantial digital footprint. There are lots of examples and case studies, and there are also mappings from other scholarly ontologies to it, which makes it helpful. It has 5 phases: conceiving, seeking, and acquiring, which clearly map to the early stages of most workflows and the beginning scholarly primitives. Processing, this big box, what we do with the material. And then finally communicating, which maps to the sharing, the connecting, the writing stage of scholarly workflows. So one of the reasons to understand all of these, one is pedagogy, the other is towards making it easier to create a common understanding of scholarly workflows and to express that digitally. And that's important for inter and multi and indeed transdisciplinary work. That people in different disciplines coming together to tackle complicated and complex problems can understand where their work and research practices plug in together. So scholarly ontologies, these are some examples from NEMO, the seeking category, which includes some fairly detailed descriptions of the sort of things we do when we seek information or research information or gather information. And many of these are familiar to people who have drawn their own diagrams for personal learning environments and can easily be mapped to it. And of course the column that's not present here, but which you can easily add, is one which identifies which digital tools are currently used for these things. And this is important, of course, because it means people sometimes use a digital tool without thinking explicitly what they're using it for. Why do you use Zotero? I use Zotero because I do this, this, and this with it. And that allows people to see how digital tools, to unpeel the use of various digital tools. This is the collaborating section of NEMO. Again, co-authoring, networking, teleconferencing. There could be more, there could be less. This is how it stands at the moment. And it gives some fairly clear, again, it breaks down the sharing and the collaborating into some more detailed subheadings that you can then associate with particular digital tools. So it makes slightly more explicit what you're doing and how you're doing it in your personal learning environment. And in terms of pedagogy, what I've been doing for a long time is not setting essays, but requiring portfolios of work which map to the different stages of the scholarly workflows and in which students are asked to actively think about what they in their personal learning do. So for example, and in these portfolio descriptions, I ask students each week or so to do a particular thing in a description which could be very similar to the sort of description that the NEMO ontology uses. And I give them an extent of how much I want them to locate, and I suggest a tool that they will use to collect this, or a range of tools that they will use to collect this. And this portfolio work, from their locating, finding readings, annotating readings, mapping readings, planning writing, goes through the stages of research analysis writing or seek, sense, share. And I regularly show that mapping of scholarly ontologies and personal knowledge workflows to students to remind them this is what we're doing in this course, and this is the destination. So this is the map, this is the route, this is the exploration that we are undertaking. So basically what I'm doing here is bringing these 3 things together. And in pedagogic terms, I ask students, first of all, to draw their personal learning environment particularly in a traditional way, without any dimension of time. Ask them then to organize it into a workflow, and also to consider the importance of trust and how they include trustworthiness of sources of information in that workflow. And then, depending on how well they're doing, ask them to break that down in more detail by applying a scholarly ontology like NEMO to it, and also by considering what tools they currently use at the very bottom level. So there are levels from the very abstract down to the more practical and focused, and different students latch onto this at different levels depending on how their orientation towards abstraction or practicality. So it provides several different entry points for them to get their teeth into this process over the course of most of my modules. So that roughly is the big picture.